Hi everyone, welcome back to Crochet Tutorials. I'm Kim. In this video I just wanted to give you a couple of tips on crab stitch borders. Crab stitch is also known as reverse single crochet, and that's because it is crocheted backwards. A lot of people don't like it because they find it is difficult. It is actually a fairly easy stitch to do once you know how to do it, but it is really wonderfully effective on things that you don't normally put a border on. So on blankets like chevron or the ripple stitch, where you might struggle to think of what kind of border to put on it, the crab stitch effectively really closes off your work in a really kind of minimalistic way that isn't just a simple single crochet. I actually also use crab stitch to edge scarves, and you know, when you've made this lovely scarf and you might use just a plain stitch throughout the whole scarf, you have a kind of bit of a funny edge and you don't really necessarily need a border on that, but a crab stitch works really well to effectively and in a kind of really interesting way close off that work. So I think the big thing that people find difficult is corners with crab stitch. Because you're crocheting backwards, it can be a real challenge to do that corner. So all I have is this triangle here, and we're going to imagine that this triangle is my project. It's a blanket. It's a very big blanket. And what I've done is I've crocheted around in crab stitch. I've simply joined to this first stitch here with a slip stitch and then chained one, and that's quite important. That chain one at the beginning is really quite important because it gets you to the height of the stitch that you require, and then you simply go into the stitches and work in the reverse. But what I'll do is just show you the corner. The corners can be really, really tricky because you're working in reverse. So if I unpick this and get to just before the corner here and pop my hook back in, essentially when you crab stitch, so this is my chain one, imagine that I've slip stitched onto this particular stitch here and I've chained one. And then all you do is just kind of turn your hook that way. Kind of normally you'd go into the stitch that way, but you're going reverse. So you go in under both of those loops for the next stitch, going in under there and grabbing that yarn and pulling it through. And then you've got two loops on your hook and you just yarn over and pull through both. So again, you're just going backwards essentially into that next stitch, grabbing the yarn and bringing it through. We've got two loops on the hook, yarning over and pulling through both. And when we get to a corner, you can kind of get yourself into a little bit of a mess with crab stitch, and I'll show you why. Because if you just keep crocheting, what'll end up happening is that you end up with this kind of lump, this weird lump, and no one wants that. And people tend to go, hang on, it went okay all along the edge, but now I've got this weird lump on my corner. And there's a kind of really easy way to stop that from happening. So when we go into the corner, you just need to make sure that your working yarn kind of comes in front of the stitch that you just made. So just bringing it around and being in front of that stitch, if I could get through, will stop that from happening. So I'm in front of that stitch with my yarn, just yarn over and bring it around and then yarn over. And you can see that I'm already most of the way around that corner. And one last time for the corner. So there's no weird lump there now, and it is crab stitched around that corner. And then all we do is go into the next stitch again and grab that yarn and put that stitch in front. And you always need to make sure that your yarn's in front of the stitches that you've just made. Otherwise you will get that weird lump in the corners. So that's the most difficult thing about crab stitch, is sort of managing how your corner runs. But if you follow that process of making sure that you're not just crocheting on top of a previous crab stitch like this, and make sure that your yarn actually sits in front, so you can bring it out and sit the crab stitches next to each other rather than on top of each other, then you'll get around that corner with no problems whatsoever. And there we go. And so one more time, you just work your hook backwards in under this stitch, grab that yarn, bring it through, 2 loops on the hook, and single crochet as you normally would. So instead of going, we're just going backwards. And that is crab stitch, and it is really effective, as I said, for blankets that don't kind of lend themselves to a fancy border, and you don't want to just do a boring old single crochet across it. Scarves are also really, really well benefited by this edge. And another great use is beanies that kind of, you may chain your beanie to work from the bottom, or you may find that if you've done a rib bottom of your beanie, that you want something across the edge that just completes it. And crab stitch is a beautiful way to go. So I hope you use crab stitch. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop them down into the comments and I will answer them as best I can. Otherwise, good luck with your crab stitch bordering endeavours. I'll see you in the next video.